you very much. That's been very informative in terms of where we are. We've got Councillor Jan Prendergast, who's one of the Maida Vale councillors, who I know has taken an interest in this and been championing it. So we shall hear from her, then followed by Councillor Tom Crockett, who's one of her colleagues, the Maida Vale councillor as well. Jan.
Chairman, thank you very much indeed for giving both my colleague Councillor Crockett and myself a chance to speak this evening. I'll be brief, as clearly I know you've got quite a long agenda ahead of you, and Councillor Crockett will speak too. There are just some salient points I'd like to emphasise before you come to your decision tonight. Clearly it's a matter I feel extremely strongly about. You might find it helpful to know that I was on site for almost the entire demolition. They didn't seem to have got very far by the time I whizzed through the wreck. Papers show my first call to officers around about 1 o'clock. I actually arrived a lot earlier than that, and the first calls were made through Anuja, who was an officer completely outstanding that day in her role. She made every possible effort to ensure that the City Council were doing all it could within its powers to halt the work. A local photographer, who's a resident, joined us very early on in the proceedings, and we're absolutely indebted to her for the evidence her comprehensive videos and photographs have provided. I don't know whether you've got a chance to see the second one yet. I picked up some outtakes from her on Friday, and they've come up to City Hall to John Walker. In one of them, I can clearly be heard asking the developers, although they denied, of course, at the time that they were developers, to stop, and telling them that their work was unauthorised. You are aware of the demolition of the Carlton Tavern. It was a lawless destruction of Westminster's heritage. And the depth of feeling about this destruction is so strong, and the anger so deep, that residents who have moved away but still have very happy memories of the park have joined forces with our present community to demand that the council hold these feckless, greedy developers to account. Tonight you must decide what the appropriate means of retribution is, and that also within your powers. I urge you to send out a strong message to measure it with this appalling act. I call upon this council to do all in its power to see the Carlton Tavern rebuilt exactly as it was. We should ensure that something good, something positive, a lasting legacy must come out of this wanton act of sheer vandalism. I ask that consideration also be given to enlarging the conservation area to include the building, the Carlton Tavern. It's the principle that's at stake here. Did these developers really think that Westminster City Council would condone this dirty work and that we should turn a blind eye? Rebuilding the tavern is the only decision to make, and I urge you to take it. I urge you to find ways to ensure this never, ever happens again anywhere in Westminster. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. And now, Councillor Tom Crockett.
Thank you, Chairman. I obviously echo everything my colleague Councillor Prendergast says, and I certainly don't want to repeat any of it. There are just a few points that I feel I'd like to make restricted to planning specific issues. The first is that for a long time pubs like this, and pubs in London in general, have somewhat been taken for granted, and perhaps at the time that the planning application came before this committee back in January, people hadn't appreciated what they were potentially standing to lose. the likelihood, I say, is discernible from the unbridled and righteous outrage of the community to this act, as Councillor Prendergast quite properly says, this act of wanton vandalism. Certainly makes it clear in my mind that had an application been made to demolish this building and jump through the hoops as the developer should have done, there would have been a similar reaction from the people of Maida Vale, and this pub would have been listed as an asset of community value. Now, that opportunity has been stolen from this community. It is a theft by these developers. And only by rebuilding this pub is that one going to be righted. And so certainly I urge this committee to accept the recommendations of officers and to order its reinstatement. And of course, in due course, I look forward to continuing to work to ensure that that is realised. The other issue I wanted to mention, apart from echoing Councillor Prendergast and my call again for the enlargement of the Maida Vale Conservation Area to include this pub, there was a point made within your submissions, the representation from Dale Ingram, who is from Planning from Pubs. I've been in contact with her, and the point that she makes, I say, is a good one, which is that this isn't an appeal which should be dealt with on paper. It's one that given the changes in circumstances, clearly is an apt candidate for to be heard by the Secretary of State by a public inquiry. And insofar as this committee has any power tonight, I would say that is an option again that should be realised.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think the representations we've heard from both councillors and also the representation from officers we've just heard, it makes it very clear that this was an act of wanton vandalism. It's an assault not just on the planning process, but I think clearly the way it was gone about, it's assault on the local community as well as the city as a whole. And I think that, as we've just heard from Councillor Crockett and Councillor Prendergast, the rapidity of the demolition shows total disregard for the interests of the local people. I know there's no breakage of health and safety because, thank goodness, nobody was harmed. But I think it certainly was incredibly dangerous in terms of just come in and bulldoze it like it was. I agree in terms of officers' recommendation in terms of a public inquiry as being the only way to deal with this appeal, and also I hear what Councillor Crockett and Councillor Prendergast said about looking at the options in terms of expanding the conservation zone to make sure that this kind of thing can't happen again. I'm interested to hear what the views of my colleagues are. Paul, what do you think?
The planning system is in place for a reason. It is there to ensure a sense of fair play, to ensure that our great cities flourish, and to ensure that we welcome innovation whilst having respect for conservation. Westminster is a pro-development authority. This can be seen from our plans and from our attitudes, but we cannot and will not tolerate flagrant architectural vandalism. Councillor Thomas Crockett spoke articulately and effectively on behalf of Maida Vale, and the ward is very fortunate to have such a strong local champion fighting their corner. Councillor Prendergast also spoke diligently for the community she has served excellently for many years, and I know that Councillor Rita Begun has done an equally excellent job at serving her constituents on this issue too. On the basis of confirmation from the Secretary of State as detailed in the officer's report, my decision would be that Westminster should issue an enforcement notice, and that no later than 18 months of this notice taking effect, the Carlton Terrace is rebuilt brick by brick. This important community asset is restored for the enjoyment of Maida Vale's local community. I hope that the developers of this site will learn from this evening that planning regulations cannot be circumvented or disregarded. They're important as they are this city's tool to ensure that we build a city to be proud of for our future, which respects conservation as well as welcoming innovation.
Thank you. Louise.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I've sat on many planning committees since I've been a councillor, and often it's very difficult to make a decision. It's, you know, things are kind of fairly equally balanced, and you think, gosh, which way should I add my voice? But tonight, it just couldn't be clearer. This, as everybody has said, this was a terrible act by the developers, trying to run roughshod over the council, but most importantly the community in which they, you know, what should be contributing. So I feel very strongly that we follow the officer's recommendation, bottom of page 3, which means enforcement and also the rebuilding of this this lovely park that obviously is enjoyed by people in the community, and they need to get it back as quickly as possible. So I agree with the recommendation.
Thank you. And Ruth.
Thank you. This is one of the times when you wonder what there is a planning system for. This clearly should never, ever have happened. Reading a report carefully, it's clear that in legal terms it's quite a complicated situation we find ourselves in fact. I was very glad to have in the late reps, Councillor Boothroyd's representation and the extract from Westminster Planning that he includes as well, because that sets out very clearly that the design, the appearance of the pub as it stood, was a material consideration when, even though the actual decision wasn't based on that. It was clearly in the committee's mind when it was discussing the matter, and I'm very glad to have that on the record, because otherwise we are on a very fine area in law, it seems to me, from reading the report closely. I don't drink very much, but I have been in this pub because it's so comfortable. It's such a comfortable place to be, and it's a tremendous loss. I certainly think that we should ask for consideration that the conservation area be extended if this is rebuilt in this way. What worries me about the rebuilding is what that does in relation to the, as it were, the authority of replacing a building. What is that? What is that? It's going to have to be everlastingly regarded as a replica because of what has happened. It isn't going to be the same building, which is dreadful. The building has gone. I would be interested to know if there are any other things that could be done, actually, whether this land could be CPO'd or something, so that it could be just got back from these people who have behaved so disgracefully. Because there's a sense in which putting a replica back, it's a bit like building a Lego building, isn't it, instead of the real thing. So the principle is right, but the practicalities worry me a bit. I am concerned about this, though, that something extremely fierce and strong should be done, both for its own sake and also because these people own the Chippenham too. And that's a worry. If they are so reckless in this case, will they be reckless in other cases? The health and safety thing concerns me as well, because it seems to me you don't have to kill somebody or break their leg before somebody gets cross with you. Surely to goodness, if you breach health and safety regulations, you ought to be liable to some sort of penalty. So I'm very surprised that nothing is, anything so feeble as a potential £2,000 fine is the limit of what can be done. So I would like to hear from the lawyer whether the absolute extent of all the legal possibilities have been considered, because I would just like to be sure that replacing this brick by brick is the actual right and strongest thing that can be done. And also I'd like some confirmation about the health and safety thing, please.
If I can just address the health and safety issue first. It was particularly unsafe demolition. The Health and Safety Executive informed Building Control they are not proposing any action. We don't have any control over that, Councillor Bush, that's not in our remit. However, I did say that because they demolished the building without getting building control approval, there is a fine of up to £2,500 on that. But it's not a huge fine, is it?
No.
In the overall scheme of things, I mean, it's pittance. But that's how the authority is split. The Health and Safety Executive, because they have viewed that it was done incredibly quickly, but thankfully, as everyone said, no one was killed, but they're not going to take any action in that respect. So what we can do from building control, and that's Tony Fenton, certain area, is to consider taking any possible action, but the fine is minuscule, it's £2,500.
Can I just come back on that? Is there any bit of the council that can actually make representations to the Health and Safety Executive and say that we're not happy with this, this is not good enough, this is not appropriate?
Well, I'm sure I can pass forward the committee's views to Tony Fenton and he can pass them on. And I think that's all I can do at this moment in time.
Thank you. Thank you.
The extent of the law? Peter?
Yes, Peter Nixon.
I must say I struggle to think of what more stringent requirement there could be than rebuilding the pub in replica. I haven't been asked to consider any other possibility, but certainly the views of the planning officers, as I understand it, is that the right course of action is rebuilding in replica. And to my mind, that is the appropriate course of action. I can't really add to that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, I think it's clear from what my colleagues have seen that we think that this is a pub which was of great architectural merit as well as being a community asset. The action by the developer to demolish it whilst the process of listing was going ahead was a flagrant assault on the process and to try and provide roughshod over the process and also the wishes of the community. And I think the only option we have is to make our views very clear in terms of demanding, as officers have suggested, that the pub is rebuilt brick by brick in the form as it we see it here. I think it's a very nice kind of vernacular revival, that kind of 1920s pub, which is kind of a recognised, valuable heritage asset. So I think our decision is clear that we agree with officers and the pub ought to be rebuilt brick by brick as we see it here.
Within 18 months.
Within 8 well, what's
I think, does it say that in the
yes, absolutely. So we agree with that. And also, in terms of the points you made about the health and safety, I think would urge Tony Fenton to make his views, and also for us to do whatever we can to make sure that the full force of powers we have under building control are brought down on the people who are guilty of this assault on the community. Thank you very much.